Thank you, Micah. Joining us now for a presentation is David Lantz. David?
I'm going to be really quick. Micah didn't have a quiz question. My quiz question for you is, how can we put these two Bibles, the books, The Battle for the Bible, which is about the loss of scriptural inerrancy, and A Guide to Church Property Law, this one written in 1979 and this one in 2006, together in 5 minutes. I was on Peter Recchio's Tea Party Talk show on Blog Talk Radio, and talking about a new book that I've written called Think Like Jesus, Lead Like Moses. And as we were talking, he said, well, why don't you come to this event that we're doing? And Susan's got a back in the back. And as we talked, Peter read something that's in my book where I met a man out of Escondido, California. His name is Peter Jones. And in 1993, he wrote a book called The Gnostic Empire Strikes Back. Peter Jones basically talks about what he calls neo-paganism that has gotten into the mainline denomination of the churches. And this is what Jones read. He said, quote, "In the name of democracy, contemporary society accepts and sanctions homosexuality, but should the church sanction practicing homosexuals and admit them to the Christian ministry? Unthinkably, some now do, causing one to wonder if the process will ever stop." Well, in the early 1990s, I was the state director of the Indiana Christian Coalition, helping elect people like John Hostetter to Congress, and was very active. And one of the things that I would do, just like Micah today, is I would go in and I would talk about the fact that I'm here to put a foot in the door to keep government regulation out of church so that the churches can do their job of presenting the gospel of Jesus Christ. And when I read this quote by Peter Jones some 20-odd years later, I realized that during the time that I said I was putting a foot in the door to keep government out of church, that in the back door, Satan was coming in and watering down the gospel of Christ. That's why Harold Lindsell wrote the book called The Battle for the Bible, and he traces the loss of the value of scriptural inerrancy through the mainline denominational churches. Now, for the last 15 years, I got out of secular politics, and I became an elder in my church, got involved in a lot of the ministries and so forth. Well, it's a mainline denominational church, and when you know, we're in the battle to leave our denomination. And one of the things that's going on is that hierarchical church denominations want to prevent local congregations from leaving their churches, and they're fighting over church property. In 2006, a guy by the name of Lloyd Lunsford wrote a book called A Guide to Church Property Law. Now, my pastor said, "Dave, you're a political guy in the church. Here, read this." So I did, because I was part of a small group of elders that helped lead us and guide us out of the denomination that we've been in forever into a different denomination that we're going into. I'm not going to mention which denomination it is. I don't think that's appropriate. My point is that Methodists, Lutherans, Episcopalians, Presbyterians, and probably some other ones too, are dealing with this issue because seminaries have got folks that are teaching really wacky stuff. For example, you've got the Presbyterian Church USA, which back in 2007 came out with what they call the PUP report, which is the Peace, Unity, and Purity report. Now, one of the things they did, they had a 5-year study on the Trinity. And they decided that they wanted to change the name of the Trinity to Mother, Child, Womb. Now, this made national news. You'll remember when Britt Hume was the guy for a special report on Fox with Britt Hume. Well, you know that Grapevine show, that portion of called Grapevine at the bottom of the hour? What I just told you about made the news in the Grapevine. It is humiliating. You know, one of the things that's happening, especially in Methodist and Presbyterian churches, is there's something called the Confessing Church movement. How many of you know about it? Okay, a few people. Hardly anybody knows about it. But the Confessing Church movement in America takes its name from what Martin Niemöller and Dietrich Bonhoeffer did in Germany in the 30s. It is to confess Jesus Christ as Lord and to call the church back to a biblical-based commitment. Folks, most mainline denominational churches, the pastor, although he preaches in the local congregation and gets money from the local congregation, he works for the denomination. In Germany, the German government appointed the pastors of the churches. And so groups like all sorts of homosexual groups have gotten into the churches to undermine the theology. And it's very difficult for pastors who realize that their pensions and their paychecks are tied up in all of this to go against the denomination. It requires the deacons and the elders and the lay people in the pews to speak up and stand up. You know, the Tea Party movement and the Confessing Church movement are made up of the same people in this room. People who are saying there's something wrong and we have to stand up and fix it. And so in closing, I just want to encourage you all to understand that the forces that we're dealing with in the secular world are also at work in the church world. Do you know that in 2008, a gay man sued Zondervan and Thomas Nelson Publishing because in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 9, where it talks about homosexuality and comes from the Heidelberg Confession, he said that that was interpreted incorrectly, that Thomas Nelson and Zondervan should have known that as a gay man this would cause him moral, harm and so forth, and he sued them. In 2009, that case got dismissed. But if you read it carefully, it got dismissed mostly because the guy just didn't follow through with the things that he could have done. I believe that the forces that are at work in the mainline denominations were promoting that kind of a lawsuit because they knew they wanted to do what Michael was talking about, which is to shut us down. So this is not something that one goes forward in regular secular politics, but with prayer and an understanding. I grew up in Goshen, Indiana. My last name is Lantz. Commissioner Omar Lantz, not related, was the deciding vote. I spoke in my home community on that. And if there's anybody from Goshen, what I need to encourage you to do, we have to go forward in Christian love. If you don't have a ministry on sexual brokenness, consider doing that. Because there are a lot of folks that have family members wrapped up in this. My first cousin, who was a lesbian, died of AIDS in 2005. So this is something that the church needs to reach out in love. Because we're not going to fight this with laws, but with love. Thanks.
Amen.